what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? Just because it's a selection of art. I think it's
well, once again, as soon as I get my grubby little mitts on a... Right, go on.
This could test me.
That's the idea.
Okay.
That's the idea.
And we've got the I can show you the instruments in the other room. Most of them are. Anyhow.
That's a possibility. I think Williams as well.
Okay.
Would. Maybe it'd be nice to have endless, I think, as well. If that's possible.
Yeah, sure.
So, brilliant. It's me or you to start. I'm happy to go with it.
Well, I'll pick up from that last question, if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
The chord too far.
Yeah.
Where do those chords come from? I'm a musician myself, and Frank is as well.
Starting.
Listen to songs, and they're major, minor, and pretty much that's it. And we listen to
just sort of doing a solo. I like a great solo song, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the soul, even sort of some of the more standard songs like Holding On Coming to Me, they do kind of chord-wise, they do a bit more than just the straight thing. And they'd have the verse where perhaps they were just busking along, and then the chorus would come in and sort of change, Harlem Shuffle, lots of these things. And Peter and I used to love that. We used to play those all the time, and he'd had a great voice for it, so he'd sing and I'd play the piano. And you discover what these people did, and I think that was a big influence.
Keyboards wise then, obviously the amount of keyboards, there's a whole host of them out there. Yes, but what is there any sort of anything that, why did you choose what you chose? Is there any
it was what the Keyboard Ready brought and said, try this.
Yeah, right.
And once you got a sort of, I think certain ones were very significant. I mentioned the Prophet. The didnt 7 was a very significant instrument too, I think, because it had sounds. There's small sounds, but you could make them sound fantastic by putting echoes and stuff on them. So those, and obviously then the sequences started to come in about that point, which obviously was a factor. I don't know really. It just tended to, these things came along. You got these sort of Korg and Roland. They all did things, and you'd get 3 or 4 fantastic sounds out of them, and sort of you was kind of stuck with it a bit. So. And sometimes you could do more. You could really explore them and do what they did. I had one called the SD1, who made that one, which I used to like quite a lot. Ensoniq, that's the boy, which I used quite extensively on still. And it was one of those ones which again was the same sort of. It seemed to be able to do slightly more with it. And then of course you got into the emulators, and I love the emulator because you could put your own sounds on it. You could even put you could obviously record riffs, and obviously that's done nowadays all the time. But in those days it was kind of more unusual. And I remember recording the first. I was trying to get a decent cello sound, and I recorded the first 4 notes of a piece that was used in 2001, which was a Cacciatura, I think that's the name. Which came from the ballet suite, Guyana ballet suite or something. And the first 4 notes of that, very sort of sloth. So I was trying to get a cello sound. Anyhow, it didn't sound great as a cello, but the first 4 notes, I recorded them. I was going to I want to use that, and I just had to put a hand on that. I played 4 notes at the same time. It sounded fantastic. I thought that's so good.
How was that?
So I used it as the introduction to "It's Going to Get Better" on that, and it was we couldn't really make the most of it. It sounded so good, but what do you do with it? So Mike started playing the riff behind it, and it wasn't in time. So it ended up being something else. But the 4 notes, it sounds remarkably like sort of Goretzky's symphony, the one that sort of became so famous in the sense. It's almost because the overlapping kind of notes. Quite interesting, really, how that worked. So I like doing things like that, and I'd sometimes just record what was going on in the studio too, like with I said this before, but with that all, I was recording Mike was just fiddling about, and he played this riff. And I played 3 notes at the same time, and it produced this kind of semblance of a riff. So I sort of kind of learnt it and made it into a song. And quite a useful writing tool. But obviously just fantastic for the sounds, and it's clavier was probably the most sophisticated synthesizer ever used, and used of wonderful sounds which were used on things like Mama, beginning of Mama, and Home by the Sea, just such a positive sound. So really good sound, fantastic sound. But it, it was incredibly expensive and incredibly unreliable. And it ended up when I did the last tour, I sampled some of the sounds and put them on sort of Proteus and used them like that. Really, it doesn't sound quite as good, but it's close enough.
So obviously you've got all of the stuff that's here, but you have a studio at home.
I have a music room at home. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a room with my stuff in.
Yeah.
And
What sorts of stuff do you use at home?
well, I've got obviously I've been doing a lot of orchestral stuff recently, so most of that stuff is actually sampled, on the computer really.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of things I use quite a bit, but I've also got some old emulator sounds. I use the flutes and oboes off that and cellos and stuff. I mean, there's quite a few things I use. I've got the Korg, what's it called?
Oasis.
That's the boy.
Yeah.
So which I used on the last talk because it was such a useful tool. Because you had combine, you could combine anything you like, you could sample anything you like. Had a good piano, good organ, and synthetic sounds, and obviously sample sounds in it. So that was wonderful. When I got that at home, which I still use quite a bit. And I've got the Roland piano, it's a piano, but really I just use it as a great touch-sensitive keyboard to play everything. But most of the sounds I'm using now probably come off large majority of the thing. If I was going to do another rock album, which I'm not, I would obviously search elsewhere.
Right.
But just doing, I'm really looking more for, strings and brass and stuff. And I've got some quite good samples for that now.
Yeah. Okay. Stuart, do you want to add
Yeah,
anything
how do you start writing songs?
Well, it's just improvising, really. Normally on the piano, not always. So I used to write guitar a bit on the piano, and sometimes I just use the, we'll just try to set up just strings and stuff, and just play with that because that slows me down a bit. Yeah, mainly it's piano, and you bang along. These days I do record quite a lot, just because it's so easy with a computer. You just record what you did, and you can then listen back to 20 minutes of rubbish, which might have 10 seconds, which is all right. And you can learn that and do it again, I suppose. Sometimes you get some bits. I had one, about a 12-minute string improvisation I did in the early 2000s, which I ended up using about 4 minutes of it, and just rearranging it, which became Black Down. It was, I just thought it was really, I just loved the way some of the stuff sounded. It sounded great, I thought. So I think what it's all about is trying to try and get a conscious brain out of it a bit. Because if you think too much, the way I write anyway, I know a lot of people do write very much with chord sequences in mind. If you want to avoid that, you've got to surprise yourself, I think. And you get you will get something that you think, what the hell was that? And that was good, and something happens, I'm always searching for new ways of chord juxtapositions, but there comes in the end, it's finite what you can do, I suppose, but it is amazing what will work if you can set it up right. I always enjoyed the way, because obviously, when you've got your C major chord, what are you going to put before it? Well, you put a G7 before it, that's C, you put an F minor, that brings you back to C very nicely, Lots of things you can do, but what you start to realise after a bit is that you can do sort of anything, you can get an A flat minor can go into C very nicely if you do it right, set it up. So I'm kind of constantly searching for sort of those kind of things, I suppose, as well. It sometimes makes it sound more contrived than it is, but it's just you sort of, when we first came into this business, we loved the Beatles and we loved all that stuff a lot, but we didn't necessarily want to write another Beatles song. We wanted to try and do what people hadn't done before. And in the late 60s, although the groups like Procol Harum were starting to show the way a little bit, most music was still quite straight. And so the idea of trying to do things where you broke all the rules, the structure was different, you didn't have repeats, you used different chords, melodies, and you used lyrics that people weren't using and everything. That's what we were trying to do. It didn't mean we didn't like the other stuff, it just meant that we felt we could do this in a way that other people hadn't done. And of course we sort of, we went down a long way down that road, but in the end we sort of felt we were repeating ourselves then, so that's perhaps why without a cab we tried desperately to try and rethink a little bit some of the things we thought before, and see if we could take somewhere else.
Well, just following on from that, one of the things because over the years I've sat and listened, particularly to Genesis stuff, and particularly live songs, and I thought, well, it's almost like that song was written for the stage. Right. Is there ever times where there's songs that were actually written with that kind of view in mind, that would make this as a... Not
really. They're always written for the thing. Even back in the early days, even though some songs were recorded, because obviously Trespass was pretty much all recorded after we'd played it live, and a lot of next two albums as well, actually. Well, yeah, Foxtrot, we've done, the only one we've really done live was probably Watch the Skies, actually. So after it, once you got ahead of yourself, that was you did something, yeah, it's been a great live, you think that, and other things you think it's been a great single, and it wasn't.
There's so nice that they listen to it, and
well, you know, you got...
That just sounds so good live, it's almost like it was written.
Yeah, well, I think when we did some things we felt they would be good live, like Los Endos or something, you know, you felt that was going to be good. It was very much a sort of playing thing, and, you know, it's kind of... I think once you got the two drummers and stuff as well, so I think it became quite... It opened it up really, you know, first showed the way with obviously with Bill Bruford when we did, particularly the Cinema show was good with the two drummers then. And then I think once Chester got involved, you know, so with the duet, which is always, well, I loved it because I could do it on and have a beer. But the few times I was actually able to hear it out front, and when I heard the thing, it was fantastic, really fantastic. But you know, from down below, we just listened for a few cues, you know. It's knock it back, go back in, come and play Los Endos, which is always, you know, unfortunately quite easy to play. So it was sort of didn't require too much, and that was just home straight after that. So it always made me feel good about the drums duet. But they did play beautifully together. And if you go back to things like One for the Vine, where they played together, you know, it was a great effect, I think.
And what songs do you find, or did you find, particularly hard to play live?
Well, I've said this before, and everyone never believes me, but Man on the Corner is the most difficult song to play live.
Okay.
Because the position of one in the bar is the problem. Now, Mike and Chester both got away with just using a different spot because it didn't really matter so much to them because, you know, the instruments they were playing, they could respond to the cues as they came, and obviously Chester was playing the beat, so it was all right, he was following the drum machine part. For me, I had to know where it was, and the first beat of the bar actually is a hi-hat. And if I lost it, I was gone. Completely gone. And the difficult one was the middle eight, the sort of nobody knows him, that bit or that section, where you if I got out of sync there, I was completely out of sync, and then afterwards it would be the sort of glare from Phil. You know. Once the drums came in, it was like, oh, thank God for that. It was easy. So that was very tough. But I mean, having said that, obviously there are other bits sort of technically difficult to play. I mean, some things I think I never played really right. Some things you just sort of build up to them a bit, I suppose. You know, it was like the In the Cage solo, which, I mean, when I hear it back, some of the times we played it, I think it's not surprising I find it difficult. We were playing it about triple speed. It wasn't tied to anything, you know, and it was so fast. I remember doing once, we played it at Nebworth. You know, I think it was September or something. It was so cold, and you know, I just couldn't begin to do it. It was absurd, really. So I used to build up to that a bit, but you know, sometimes it would be all right. When I hear it back, sometimes it sounds better than I remember. But I mean, I've always been I'm not trying to be modest or anything. I'm technically not the greatest player, and it's, you know, the fast stuff. I was always pushed myself. I tried to play things as difficult as I could, I suppose, just because I enjoyed doing that. Really. So things like Robbery, Assault and Battery were very tough. It's to play, particularly this is 13/8. You know, I was always trying to ignore sort of the drums because they're playing off beats and things all the time. So, you know, sometimes you just sort of, yeah, in terms of that, I mean, I'm trying to think if anything else was really particularly difficult to play. I mean, all the solos had their moments. You know, the Duke's Travels solo, bits and pieces in that. When we did the whole thing, of course now we only did a smaller part on the tour. That was an easier part for me, but not so for Phil. It was very difficult for trying part. So, you know, it's, I mean, you do try to write. I mean, sometimes the simple things can be difficult because you kind of you forget, because you relax. You know, and there's been a few classic cases, and the key, which I was obviously pretty good at, was looking like it wasn't you that made the mistake, it was somebody else. I remember playing Dodo once, going on, I kept going on the verse when it should have gone to the chorus, you know. And Phil looked around and he thought, it's me. He thought it was Phil, he thought it was him, you know. And I just carried on next and then went to the chorus, you know, later. But Darryl looked across, he knew. Darryl always knows. He always knows, you can't get away with him. He knows the music better than we do, so kind of thing. So yes, you know, it's you know, a lot of it is, I think when you play any show, you have all about half a dozen moments you build up to, and then half a dozen moments you relax, and you have to let yourself relax, because otherwise you're so tense because you're out there. You're very exposed, and I'm not a show off really, so I'm kind of out there. And the important thing is, for the songs that were easy, like "Hold on My Heart," something the last one where you could just relax from it. It was a relaxing song in every sense. I made the most of that because you knew you got another one coming up soon, which wasn't going to be quite so relaxing.
Okay. Keyboards that you've used then. So, how many of them have you actually still got now? So looking back
I've got quite a few of them really. Tended to. Well, often we used to buy them in pairs because you'd have to have a spare. Sometimes I got rid of the spares. Some got lost. The original Big Mellotron got lost. It was kind of being mended in two halves, and we did find someone who said they got it, but then we lost it again. So I'm not sad to see the back of that. It was a nightmare machine. It really was. I don't know how historic instrument. It was one of the ones that King Crimson used. I bought it off with Robert Fripp. He had three of them, and I think he said to everybody that all three of them, they were all the one that was used on Court of the Crimson King. Probably none of them were. He probably just put the job lot. It was a nightmare. Just keep it working all the time. It's a real nightmare. And I've still got the organ, the original L122 I had. And I've probably got quite a lot of them. Really. There's a few. I've had some of those later, sort of sample type synths. Perhaps have gone. And we did have a bit of a clear out a couple of years ago. But we ended up keeping quite a few. So
I mean, the one that I said I'm relatively new. The Emulator 2 I think would be the one that if I've got a few now, but if we get an Emulator 2 I think that would be the one that
well, you might as well get an Emulator 3 because that can do pretty much everything Emulator 2 plus a bit more. And the 4s obviously which the 4s are what I got, but they're rack mounted 4XPs and stuff, so it just gives you more memory. But there was something about because Emulator 1, it was very exciting just to be able to sort of put a microphone out and do things. I mean, we recorded, you do everything you can. I recorded a koto, which Mike played. When we went to Japan, he got given a koto or something, so we recorded that. And I used that on Mama, a little bit of Mama. And then another thing we used was a mic, the wine glass, which you had to do that. So sampled that, and I used that very extensively on Red Wing. Right. That's the sound on there, is that. It's just one thing, obviously different notes created by the keyboard. Actually it's very pure sort of sine wave, it has a lovely quality about it. So the emulators, they're a lot of fun, more entertaining than some of the other instruments.
So is there any particular reason why you kind of stuck at emulator and didn't go down a Fairlight route?
I'll tell you why, because I went to see Psycho at the time, who handled both Fairlight and the Synclavier. And I thought Synclavier was a much better synthesizer than Fairlight, but I love the sounds on the Fairlight. And they said to me, Synclavier told me, they said, the sampling part of that's coming out next month. So I parted with an incredible sum of money for the Synclavier, waiting for that, and it never came. So we went, that's why I ended up going the emulator route, because I couldn't afford to have both a Synclavier and a Fairlight, because they're both a nightmare, But a lot of the Fairlight was a very fine instrument at its time, but no. So I never actually even played one. Used some of the sounds because they ended up being used as that sort of puffy vocal sound that was used quite extensively, which was obviously had an emulator sample of it, which was pretty good.
Yeah. So of the keyboards that you've obviously used now over time and stuff, I mean, is there anything you could go back and kind of just use again and just use?
Well, I sometimes think about it. I mean, I sometimes think about the Polymo because it was a very, a very useful instrument. The other instrument I used to use at the same time as the Polymo was the Quadro, because it had this gated. You could play it. It had a very simple system of playing from another instrument. So when we did Mama, for example, Mike had written this, the drum box part on that, which was a fantastic sound, I think, because the way it sounded. But anyway, we put a cowbell in there going all the way through, put it into my Quadro. And so I just play chords, sounds like I'm going ding, 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 ding all the way through, but not. So the cowbell's playing me, but I had to just change the chords all the time, which made life a bit easier. Even on the video, I cheat on the video, I look like it. But it was, so you could do that, and I used it obviously on the Chord Too Far on the song Bayou. Used that very extensively, and also on This Is Love uses that effect. And I used various other ways you could trigger instruments. In fact, on This Is Love, I triggered using the Geepex triggers as well, which is a technical thing, but you could use them, and I triggered the, I think it was the Prophet or something from that, and had the Quadro triggered from the drum machine.
You can't as well for Christmas time use the same effect with the Quadro.
Right.
You listen to it.
Yeah, that's what I've
And it just had, because it had the sockets in the back. None of these instruments, later instruments did, but the problem with the Quadro, of course, was it came out really just before the sort of all the sampling synthesizers came out, so it was kind of dated before it started, but it did have some fantastic things on it. And the way it combined stuff, an arpeggiator in it, which was wonderful too, which of course I used on Duke's Travels, was a marvellous effect that I loved. It's much easier to play it like that. But you put a thing, all this marvellous stuff would be happening all over the place. And obviously had a bass pedal in it, and you had a monophonic synthesizer, so I could do all the old parts on it as well. So it was useful. I think I've got 2 of them. I think only about a dozen of them. And I think the other 10 only sold because I was using it as far as I remember. And I think went some bust after that, or got taken over. I think. So it was a fun instrument.
So obviously the times have changed a little bit, so we've got a lot of digital stuff around now. I mean, is there a general preference now? Do you prefer the old analog equipment, or do you enjoy the digital?
I like digital. I have to say I enjoy digital because it's certainly from the point of view of the recording and just making demos and just doing everything. It's you can do it all. You can do it all so easily. Really, it's great, and you've got a whole range of sounds. The sounds are unlimited now. You know, and I say particularly when doing the orchestral stuff, it's just great to have all the stuff available like that. And I love what you can do on the, I use Cubase, and when you're working in MIDI, the fact you can do so much, and obviously you can put things in time, but you can move stuff around, you can change key, you can change speed, you can change, I mean, everything in relation to everything else. I think that's all wonderful. But you ask me what instrument I prefer to play, I will sit down and play the piano. I mean, that's my instrument, which is as analog as you can get.
Yes.
And I do like to use it. I mean, I know on 6 I didn't use it at all, but that was I wanted to do an album I didn't play on. It was very important to me to do that. As a composer, I wanted to do something where I was just the composer and not the player.
Yeah.
So next time I won't mind doing that again. But it's I think I love electronic. I'm afraid I'm not a purist at all with all this stuff. I like CDs, or I like, as long as the quality is high quality, CD. I'm not so, MP3s are not quite so good, but it's so much easier than putting on scratchy records. And all the things you can do with it. I mean, with this, I've got 4 CDs here, all sort of 60, 70 minutes each. That would be sort of 8, 10, 12 albums. People say, well, why don't you do a vinyl version of this? I said, well, what are you going to do? It would be 12 albums. Who's going to go for that? So I do like all that. I mean, there was excitement with it. I do like the size of the old albums and everything. But in terms of the gear, I'm happy to go digital.
Brilliant. So obviously we talked about the Oasis and just because of Corona.
It came just at the right time. For me, I'm sure now it's been superseded by all sorts of other stuff, but it was a very useful tool for me because pretty much, although whatever I looked like I was playing on the last tour, I was pretty much playing the Oasis all the time on everything. Just with sample, everything else was hooked up to that. A few little 1 or 2 things, the Proteus I was using stuff, but not much else. It was a very good machine. Still is, I'm sure.
I've just treated myself to the Kronos.
Is that
New Year? That's the next one on.
Next one on, is it? Oh, right. I thought I should be updating myself, but
everything that's on the Kronos, on the Oasis you can.
So have you gone for the one which is a spring touch or piano touch?
61. The bottom end, the 61.
So that has a spring-loaded keyboard.
It's a nice feeling. So it's not the heavy-weighted one.
Yeah, well, the heavy-weighted one's great if you want piano sounds. That's why. So I've got both. I've got the piano one, but if you want to play fast synthesizer parts, you need the spring-loaded one, so they return nice and quickly. Because otherwise to have a flat-fingered player anyhow. So quite difficult to play very fast on a piano-weighted keyboard unless you really are very.
I always wanted an Oasis purely because some guy called Sonny Banks used to use one, and but I ended up getting the Kronos.
I should get royalties from these things, shouldn't I? Well, that's why they used to give you these instruments sometimes, because they hoped that people would. We used to get. I didn't get given that actually, but some of the others over the years you get given. With some various Korg instruments before that, they were pretty generous with. They did a lot of good stuff. I mean.
I was lucky. I went on New Year's Day into the local music shop in Liverpool,
Right.
and they just put the for sale sign on it.
Right.
So I managed to get it there and everything quicker in the box.
Great. Well, there you go.
So I'm sure I was going to be lucky. So, I mean, how did you go about getting the older sounds for the Oasis? Because obviously there's...
Well, it wasn't too difficult, really. I mean, some people say I didn't get them as good enough, but I mean, I wasn't necessarily going to 100% try and get everything I had. It wasn't necessarily what I was trying to do. But it's got an organ built into it, obviously. So that made the organ sounds are quite easier, and you get a better organ sound out of them, things like in the cage than I did perhaps using the Prophet, which is what I used to use for the organ sounds.
Right.
So obviously we stopped using an organ in Trick of the Tail, was that Bonds, I think.
Yeah.
So I was still playing all the old Afterglow and all the stuff which used Afterglow. Obviously that was on Wonder Mother, was it? Anyway,
Yeah.
I stopped using the organ and had to substitute. And with the Prophet, with particularly once you got the chorus and the phasing and everything on it, you could simulate a pretty good fat organ sound.
Okay.
But with the Oasis, some of the ones I went back to getting a more organy sound, because you could do it almost like with the drawbars,
Yes. Yeah.
like you did before. And and in terms of the synths, it's obviously you could monophonic synth sounds, because some of them depended on being monophonic. The Oasis could do that as well, so you can get the portamento sounds. I don't know, I spent a lot of time on it really before we did that tour, and I spent quite a few months getting all the sounds together that I could and what I felt I could. Some of I had the processes for the old synclavier sounds and a few others, and try to get everything as close as I could to being right. And even so, when I got out there, I had to change quite a bit, but I was pretty well prepared actually. I was well prepared. Mike was well prepared. Darryl was always well prepared. Phil was completely unprepared. So it took him 2 weeks of just sort of trying to get to play like he used to, which I think is what did him in actually, trying to play like he did on Duke's Travels, which was a really tough piece of playing. Chester seemed also had to do it as well, but he seemed to sort of get there. But I don't know. There you go. That's how it was.
Okay, Stuart.
You're answering the questions that were going on here.
That's right.
That's fine. I've heard you've got a Prophet T8.
I do have a Prophet T8.
Was that used on anything?
I did. I probably did. I wasn't that keen on it. I got it because it had a piano-weighted keyboard, really, but I didn't find it as friendly as the other ones. Some reason or other. I can't think if I actually ended up using it on it. I'm not sure I did. If I did, it would just be it wouldn't be distinguishable from the other parts. Must have used it on something. What era was that? I'd have to. You probably, if we looked on the track sheets, you'd probably find I did use it on something.
Okay. I'm the same. Would go there with the CS80.
I only used that on one album, which is Duke. I didn't really get on with the CS80. I have to say, I liked some of the sounds, but I didn't find it. I was much more into the Prophets and stuff, really. So I think I just sort of. I used it to Duke's Travels. Obviously, it was used quite extensively on that. It had a little feature which was quite good on it too, where you could use a microphone to play the sound, which we used as turn it on again for the bub-up each time. So Phil would go bub-up and hold the chord down. So I'm not sure I did it really any better than anything else. I think he did it. He didn't do that. He used a duck. He had a trumpet. It was actually maybe just been a duck call that he used for it. I used a duck call to trigger the sample, trigger the CS80 to get the sound. But I used it a fair bit on the album actually, but I didn't really feel the need to do it live, and so I didn't. And so it kind of fell by the wayside. I had some guy who was very keen on to have one, so I sold one to him, because I know some people really love that instrument.
They're worth an absolute fortune now.
Yeah, I know. I think I've still got one somewhere. Ooh, I should be selling it. It's funny how some of these things hold their value and others don't. No one wants to know about them. But,
A lot of stuff's gone to the roof at the moment.
Some of that's the SL now and stuff, I know. Well, I do have some of these things, but I keep some of them for old time's sake, and others because maybe they'll get used.
You find yourself coming in here and playing them every now and again? Or
No,
you just think about them?
I just think about them. I've got some at home, which occasionally. I'm more a writer than anything else, so I do really sit down and I just want the quickest way to get to writing, so I tend to play the piano, and I tend to have that hooked up all the time so that it can play a string sound as a shadow, so piano and strings really. And that's the main way I work. Other times I'll try to switch the piano off sometimes and just play the strings, like I did with Black Down, because I think it slows me down and makes me focus more on sort of the way the chords change rather than sort of trying to play rhythmically all the time, you know. So I don't really use many other sounds, I suppose, really, apart from the ones that are on the computer.
Okay, well, talking about sounds again, you keep mentioning the piano. Which the piano are you referring to?
Well, when I say I play the piano at home, as a thing, it tends to be a sampled piano.
Right.
It's actually a sample. I mean, I've got 2 or 3 of them. The one I've always quite liked is the Philharmonic sample. Also there's the Oasis one too, which I use sometimes as well. So it's a bit slightly more synthetic that, but it sounds quite good. I've also got the CP70, which I use as well, but I don't tend to use that so much now. I've got the original Yamaha we bought for London on Broadway. We bought because we had to have a piano, and we took that down to Wales with us and brought it back up again, and I ended up with it, which I don't really play very much. It's played by lots of kids. Whenever they come, they sort of bang. It's not the greatest sounding piano, actually, honest, as a sine wave goes. It's a sort of medium ground or something. And then I got a Yamaha upright, which I do play sometimes, but I get terribly into playing with the headphones on and stuff, so I tend to use the electronic stuff more than anything else. Because in a way, as soon as you start playing out loud, anyone else around sort of hears you, and you're sort of semi-performing, and you don't really want to be doing that. I used to mind in the old days. I used to just drive everybody insane with it, you know, just bang away in the house, you know. I don't know, more and more as time's gone by, as I've been able to, the headphones, because you can really work on that. You can play that thing 1,000 times, and it doesn't worry anybody else, you know. And I quite like that.
So are there any particular songs that you go back to playing that you enjoy playing?
Yeah, there's a few chord sequences I quite like to sort of go back to. I try to remember what I did half the time. Really. I play bits and pieces sometimes from Mad Man Moon, more the chord verses, not so much the middle part, as I really love the chord sequence on that. I was really pleased with that at the time. Me and Sarah Jane's another song I've always liked a lot. It's one of my favourite songs, and I love the way it starts, because it just really is just 2 notes and just the chords working around it all the time. Like it sounds like you're doing all sorts of things. You're not. The 2 notes are going, and then I change the 2 notes to another 2 notes and do more and more. So right the way up until the chord standing on a corner bit. What's that? No, standing on the other corner. That bit up to there is all pretty much done the same way all the way through, and I quite like doing that. It's quite fun, seeing how far you can go and get away with it, really. And then, but I love the song. I love the way some of the key changes in that. You know, first time standing and first time flying. So that's a song that lives with me already. I won't say I play it all the way through for pleasure. I just like to. I sometimes just try to remember what it was I did. You know, everybody always. As a party piece, obviously, it's always the further fifth. Everyone says, further fifth, you know. The trouble is, you go on the internet now, onto YouTube, you find there's 100 people there who can play it better than I can. One of them's a 13-year-old girl, I think. So it's, so I come back to these things. I'm trying to think what else I might come back to. It's probably what
It's a hard question.
It's quite a hard question, really. I mean, Undertow is, you know, from the Undertow, I try to remember these things. When we've been mixing an album, I sometimes go back and try to remember what it was I did, because I can't remember a click. Then once you played it a bit, first of all it's very odd, and then your hands sort of get back into what you did before, you know. And I have at various times tried to relearn a lot of the songs I did, and so some of them I can't remember, so I just cannot get right back into it. I sort of remember, but not completely. Trick of the Tail, I always like playing that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I'm recently learning Entangled, or the outro of Entangled.
Yeah, well, that was more it was the chord sequence when I was just playing the melody line. That chord sequence was, I think, actually, although he's not credited on, I think the chord sequence of that end bit, I think, was Mike's actually, and we just used to sort of like bluesing on it, and just sort of playing chords against the chords and seeing what I could get away with a bit, which is something I always like to do with Genesis, you know. But the verse is obviously Steve's on that.
Yeah.
It's a nice piece.
It's took me 18 months to learn the back end of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, from scratch. Because I'm totally
Okay,
self-taught, so it
Yeah,
took 18
yeah, well,
months.
that's, keep at it.
And now,
It should be
frankly,
quicker, yeah.
it's now getting it's now just getting the sounds.
Yeah.
It's getting the pro soloist and the mellotron
Yeah.
choir to sound
Pro
right.
solo, it's just that was that thing of that great touch sensitive thing, so you get this ridiculous vibrato on the sound. It used to sound like it's a mouse, so it was like a cartoon mouse that bit at the end.
That's what I'm trying to struggle with. I'm trying to get right to
You
the
press it
track.
really hard while you play it.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't play them all at the same time, you see. It's the
Yeah.
thing you've got to understand. Well, I suppose I did play the mellotron and the synth at the same time, but you need to have someone playing the guitar chords in the background at the same time as well. So. You must have a tired hand over there. Not for the obvious reasons.
Do you listen
Thank
to
you,
other
Tony.
programs at all?
I don't really, I'm doing some thing in 2 or 3 days' time, and I've got to name my sort of 7 favourite prog pieces, and I'm going to struggle. It's not that I don't like it, but I suppose I didn't really sort of follow it while we were in the prog world. Everyone was a competition in a way, and although we play with groups that I used to quite like, I don't quite know what constitutes prog. That's another problem. I mean, is Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, is that prog? I'd say it's prog, but not technically prog, is it? Which I think is one piece of music, So I've mentioned Quarters of Crimson King before. I mean, that album at the time obviously was singing. I liked some of the Yes stuff. I think particularly the Yes album, when Tony Kaye was the keyboard player. I thought that was their best era. But do I listen much now? I don't really know much. I suppose I don't really listen to that much music. I think it's so saturated with your own stuff. I'll switch on the radio and I'll hear what's on sometimes, but I tend to listen to Radio 4, but if Radio 4 is sort of on the Archers, then I'll switch over and listen to, it could be anything, 2, 6, Radio 2, Radio 6, Absolute. And you hear, but a lot of those people are playing old pieces anyhow, So you're never quite sure, and I never really know. Half the time they won't tell you what they're playing, so I don't know. That's great, what was that? And it could have been something that was released in 1976, I don't know. Because I think there are 2 kinds of people actually who get in rock groups. There are those that listen to a lot of stuff, a lot of things all the time, and those that don't really listen much at all. And I'd always been one of the latter. I listened to everything up to 1967, 1968, and then when we started playing ourselves, so much stuff I didn't listen. A lot of it came from recommendations from other people. So I mentioned Woodface before, which I think Nick Davis recommended to me. Other things you come across. My kids were very keen on when the Crash Test Dummies, that first album of theirs. It was a great album, And I always liked 10cc. I did look out for them a bit because I thought them was great. Nick Kershaw, obviously another one I did as well. So you had people you listened to, but I didn't have my ear to the ground in the way that I did really. And certainly in terms of the more, I wasn't that keen on some of these groups. I have to be saying, much as I loved the Nice, I was never very keen on Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I just found it was everything we were trying not to be, I suppose, in all honesty. Not to say some good moments in there, but so that kind of put me off a bit. And some of these other groups, you just got fed up with everyone saying, you should be listening to, or you're not as good as Camel or Gentle Giant or Bartley James Harvest. So, we played with them. I think some nice stuff. I used to like Red Bird. They were great. Audience, did some good stuff. Van der Graaf had their moments. Weren't great live though, I have to say. Not a great live band, but they definitely had their moments. So yes, I suppose I probably you've helped me now with my setting. I've got a Van der Graaf track. I can probably get a Caravan. They used to play with them a lot of times. They're nice chaps. You got quite some people you end up playing with them half a dozen times, and you get to know them quite well. And very helpful. Rare Bird obviously were very helpful to us. They introduced us to Tony Stratton-Smith and things. Caravan, they were sort of one stage ahead of us in those early days, and I remember them turning up with the WEM PA, which was the one everybody wanted at the time. When they sort of went there and said, "Wow, they've got it!" We still had a couple of old old dodgy speakers we put out there, but. I've got a few people I can name now. I have to check what the songs are called, I can't remember.
Thank you.
I think I'm done.
Yeah, you're done, yeah. Okay, so when we look at Genesis and you look at the live stuff, obviously some of the rigs that you've played in front of have been pretty impressive. Is there any one of those that's been your personal kind of favourites of them all?
I don't really know. I mean, there was certain periods of the sort of where everything seemed to sort of fit quite well together. The little Mellotron was a much more tameable beast than the big one, so he was quite nice, you know, and also had the voices on it and things, which was quite good. So that period was quite a nice period with the pro soloist and the organ, the Mellotron. I don't really necessarily totally remember what I had at various times. You know, whatever I had at the time, I was pretty happy with, really, because that's what I used it for. You know, it was quite fun. You know, the Prophet 10 was this massive sound you could produce, and it made you feel good. Like in the middle of Mama, you know, you come with this like that. That's just fantastic. So I don't know really. Yeah, that was a nice period. With the synclavier, when I used that on the road, when the sound of the synclavier live is just amazing sound. You know, such bite to it. So I can't say it's a favourite. Each one at the time was a favourite, really.
So just looking back over the history then, so of the major keyboards we've heard about, we had sort of the Prophet and synclavier, but what are your real sort of lasting memories, if you have to sort of, what are your lasting memories of those?
What,
you kind
good, bad, or what?
Good, bad and indifferent.
Well, I mentioned the old Mellotron, which was a nightmare as a secretary. You had to end up rebuilding it every night, and you never knew quite what you're going to get. You play the thing, and sometimes half the notes would stick, and then half the notes wouldn't work. And you had this mount, because we came on stage and played Watch for the Skies was how the show opened, you know. And when it worked, it was fantastic, but often it didn't, you know. It was a bit weird, and so that was bad. We had problems with when we first went to America with the different, because these cycle-controlled motors of the old Hammonds, we didn't realise that they were cycle-controlled, so it came on with the organ, suddenly realised it was sharp, because it was 60 cycles over there as opposed to 50 cycles over here. So that meant we had to spend about 3 or 4 hours trying to build a power supply for it in order to play the show, which was a nightmare as well. So those are a couple of bad moments. I mean, I mentioned the synclavier is just a fantastic sound, but a rather slightly delicate instrument, I think it was. Hammond organ was always wonderful. I mean, I came, when I first started playing the organ, I had never really played it. I'd only really played a piano. I did play a little bit of organ on Genesis Revelation, but that was just, we borrowed an organ for that. For some strange reason, there's a semitone sharp, which is why on the song, Fireside Song, the chorus comes in a semitone higher, because that was the first entry, wasn't it? We thought, well, that sounds quite nice, I like that. So it meant the other places I used had to learn all the parts semitone down, you know. The Hammond, because when we first started playing live, I had the Hammond. I had to start to play piano parts on the Hammond. So something like The Knife, which was originally written, the verse part I'd written on a piano, just played it on the organ. It sounded pretty good, so that was okay, really. But trying to sort of learn that you hold down a chord rather than sort of keep hitting it all the time took a bit of time to get to know how to do that. But it was, it's a wonderful sound in itself, really. I suppose it's one of the most, it's a very distinctive kind of quality, I suppose. Later instruments, I mean, there were all so many good ones. So they all had 1 or 2 good sounds on them, and you kind of used it, And I'm quite fun with the JD 800 or what it was I used, which had this drum box in it, which you could play the sounds, And Mike had this, this riff, I Can't Dance riff, which was like kind of, he'd been torturing us with it for months. And we tried doing it really heavy, and I thought, well, that's okay, but it's a bit something, And one time, I had this thing, I just got this new keyboard, and I started hitting things, and I thought, that sounds great. So I went boom, like that, and just played with the bass drum and the snare as they were, and just played all these funny sounds on it. And it made it kind of suddenly became more light-hearted, And we thought we could do something with this. This would be fun to do, And okay, that's not Paul. That's definitely not wrong. It was a lot of fun, really, and tried to keep it as simple as possible. Just keep the thing, maybe just go away from the riff a couple of times, just wrote some simple chords. And then Phil wrote it was a joke lyric on it, and I think produced a great song. I think it works on its own level very well. In some ways, I'm as proud of that as anything else, because it does. The ability to write simple is really quite different. the ability to write complex. You know? And I'm, for myself, give me 26 minutes and every chord in the book, I can write you something. You know, if I've got to tie myself down to 3 minutes and then use 3 chords, I think I'm going to struggle always. That's how I am. So, you know, I'm quite proud of that one because it was sort of something that came direct in the studio.
The JD was got I've got one of those. That's the thing I got started off with 4 or 5 years ago. Somebody in a Genesis tribute band was selling it, and he was emigrating, and he said, "Listen, you're interested?" And it was just a conversation from that said, "Right, I'm going to try. This is me restart 30 years later." And so it was this huge thing.
Well, you can buy the box versions if you want. I've got one in a box, but I don't use the drum sounds anymore. Actually, in fact, when we played it live, I did use it. We used it. It did cheat a bit. We used a sequencer. Which we did on the album as well, of course, actually, sequence the part. But when I originally played it, it was all done live, you know. I know, sequencers are troubles. It's always easier to go that route, and then you never trust yourself in the end. You do, and a couple of times I've been guilty of using what I should have done. I think the middle of Absolutely Takes Me by Surprise, where I sequenced the part, I should have played that. You get to the point though when you start to lose confidence slightly, because you know you can't play it quite as well as the sequencer, so you sort of, you know, you bow to it a little bit, and most of the time that's okay, but sometimes there are some bits that should have that flow to them, you know, and I try to do as much as possible not using the sequencer.
So do you use much software at all? Software such as keyboards and software, and how do you use software?
Well, I do use more the orchestral sounds. I use are all software. Most of the sounds, even the piano, is software, and I use Cubase as my basic, program because I tend to use it mainly. I'm using the MIDI part of it more often than I'm using the. If I want to record something, you can still do that on that, obviously. But obviously, Pro Tools is probably better if you want to do the whole thing like that. But I never really got my head around Pro Tools, so I can't get its use. But fortunately, other people kind of feel that they know what they're doing. So. But I used to. Well, it's probably the Pro Tools with Cubase. They keep rewriting the program, so you get used to it, and then the next one comes in and nothing's in the same place and what you're doing. But so I mean, I'm very much software based. That's what I tend to use all the time for everything. Just because it's so versatile, and you can, as a writing tool, you wonder what guys like Beethoven would have made if they'd had this kind of stuff. I think it would have been fantastic because it's just so much you can do. You haven't got to keep it all in your heads in the same way. You can put it down, ideas as they come to you, and however good you are, you're always going to forget things otherwise. I think.
I've started so now, but it's still a struggle.
Well, I think
trying to learn everything.
It takes time to things. I mean, I built up, so when I first started using sequencers, it was a Yamaha thing, I think it was called QX1, which I used for things like Land of Confusion, the bass line of Land of Confusion. And that was great. And then the Ataris came in with a sort of something called Pro 24, which was the forerunner of Cubase. And so I started on that, which was quite a simple program at the time. So once I started with that, I've been able to progress over the years, because I think it drops straight in now with one of these modern programs. It must be pretty tough. Although they probably help you through it a little bit more than they used to, because some things are more obvious. But I don't know, it's a lot of stuff to learn.
Well, I think I've come to the. Are you up for a little challenge?
Well, depends what the challenge is. You can ask me questions about Genesis.
No.
Part
strange you don't know. Doing a bit of research before we come down, and I was looking at the number of keyboards that we think you've used. We've got 60 seconds on the clock.
How many?
How many can you remember?
Well, I've got to actually give the names.
Oh yes.
Well, that's obviously grand piano.
Yep.
There was a Hammond L122 and a Hammond T1 as well. So they're both there.
Yeah.
Polymoog, CS80, you've helped me a bit recently, haven't you? Prophet 5, Prophet 10, Prophet T8.
Yeah.
ARP Pro Soloist.
Yeah.
ARP 2600.
Yeah.
Let's see, there's the DX7.
Yeah.
SD1.
Yeah.
Ian Sonic's VS1, I think, which is another version of the same
thing. Not listed,
there's well, I mean, obviously I've used, I don't know if there's sort of JD800 with that. There's also, I don't know if I'm allowed to, the Korg Oasis. There's the Korg Trinity, the They had a couple of others, I can't remember what they're called now. What was the chord one everybody used? Wave Station.
Wave
That was it,
Station.
that's a great instrument, actually. I don't know if do the box versions count differently. You've got E1, E2, E3, E4, E4 XP. I'm doing quite well here.
I've done pretty well, actually.
The quadrant.
Yeah.
So the ones in the boxes, I don't know if you've got JD990, I don't know if you count that.
Well, they'd have that.
Okay. I know the Akai sampler. What number that was, I don't remember.
I've got that one.
Akai, they used that.
Yeah, you could have that one.
And
The S900.
Was it? Yes, something like that could be. I've done enough.
I think you did have that one.
The Akai, though, if you don't know the Akai I used, the main thing I used on that was the marimba sample, which I used on Tonight, which is used throughout the song.
Mm-hmm.
Played it just like a piano, it's a great sound. Put it through the would have been through a SP, whatever. No, not SP. SX. What are they called? What are they?
SPX.
SPX, that's it. Through one of those. With the echo on it. Just a wonderful sound. So the combination of the organ and that is what's the basis of that sound. Really. It's just so much atmosphere. It sounds like milk bottles being hit actually, but it's just and the only problem with that song was when we played it live, we had to take it down a semitone. Semitone just about cope with the semitone, but tried to take it down a tone for Phil's voice, but the marimba just sounded like mud if you did it down too far, so we didn't do it. It's got to fit back. And so we had to still struggle with So it was a problem live singing, on the album you could push it as high as you could get. It's the same with Peter. Push it as much as you could get, and then you got stage, and of course you couldn't really do it, so then you had to try and change the keys, which could be a nightmare. But of course with modern technology, you could do that with a button.
Yes.
You want them to relearn in the cage suddenly in two different keys, which is what we played it in. Would have been a bit of a struggle. Can't have to do that. Okay, good stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Right, well I hope you can edit that down.
When I get my hand back, so to speak.
Just need to press the stop button on that one.
Which is the stop button? That.